Little Thérèse, Chapter 2. But joy was soon turned into sorrow. After a few weeks, Thérèse became so ill that it seemed as if God were going to ask for her back again. No efforts were spared to restore her to health, but human remedies were useless, and even for the fervent prayers of her heartbroken mother were for a long time unavailing. The doctor had given up all hope of saving her life when suddenly, as if by a miracle, Thérèse began to grow better and was soon well enough to be taken into the country, to the little village of Semall, a few miles from Alençon. The worthy peasant family to whose care she was confided consisted of the father, Daddy Moses, the mother, and 4 children. The mother's name was Rose, but she was generally called Little Rose because she was so small. The baby rapidly grew strong in the bracing country air. She spent the whole day out of doors. When her foster mother was going to work in the fields, she would take Thérèse with her, snugly tucked into a wheelbarrow filled with hay. If it was time to milk the cow, she would set off with Thérèse in her apron, and then, as she needed both hands to work, she would tie her charge securely on the cow's back. This cow was a splendid animal, white with reddish markings, and therefore called carrots. One of these marks was at the tip of her right ear, and made her look quite saucy, especially when she held her head erect, as she did when Thérèse went for a ride on her back. These rides would seem to have brought good luck to the cow, for later, when a disease broke out among the cattle, carrying off so many that the villagers were almost ruined, carrots remained unharmed, to the great joy of Daddy Moses and his family. Meanwhile, baby Thérèse was growing more and more attractive. She was always laughing, and her little face was framed with the prettiest golden curls. All the village children loved her, and they used often to dance round her in a ring, singing rhymes and kissing her in turns. There was one boy of 11 who did not content himself with looking at her. He used to take her in his arms and lift her up to receive the homage of her little courtiers. That boy is now a priest. Once, when the children were playing in this way, the old curé of the village came up. He gazed long and earnestly at Thérèse and gave her a blessing, praying that she might one day be like her glorious patroness, the great Saint Teresa. Then he began to speak to the children about the family of little Thérèse, about her parents and her grandfather Martin, an officer in the French army who had been decorated by Charles X for distinguished services to his country. He went on to tell them stories of Madame Martin's family, the Guérins, who had helped and sheltered priests during the persecution which followed the revolution in France. The grandfather of Thérèse was then only a child of 3 or 4, but he had taken part in the troubles of those sad times. On one occasion, the little fellow was actually sitting on a trough in which his uncle, a priest, was hiding from the revolutionary soldiers. But he spread out his toys so solemnly and seemed so engrossed in them that the searchers did not even think it worthwhile to make him get down. He used also to accompany his uncle when the latter went round the countryside visiting the people, and the child's presence disarmed all suspicion as to the identity of the good priest, who was disguised as a peasant. But to return to our story, Monsieur and Madame Martin often went out to Semall to see their baby daughter. The elder girls who were at school at the Visitation Convent of Le Mans, where their aunt was a nun, were not so fortunate. They were all the more delighted, therefore, when during the holidays they could make a visit to Little Rose's cottage, the object of all their walks. There were still greater rejoicings when, on March 11th, 1874, Thérèse came home. She was then 14 months old and was beginning to toddle alone and to prattle incessantly in baby language. The whole household welcomed the child, who was to gladden their lives by the charm of her sunny temper and her affectionate heart. Chapter 3. The early childhood of Thérèse, her first victory. Little Thérèse, having been so long in the country, took some time getting used to the town. She would scream loudly when fashionably dressed ladies came near her, and if they wanted to take her in their arms, they had first to remove the offending hat, because she had a special dislike to hats. She kept her smiles for people dressed like her peasant friends, but she soon became at home, and all her love centered in her mother. She followed her about everywhere, in the house and in the garden, and never liked to be parted from her. She would not even go upstairs alone without stopping on each step and calling, "Mama!" And if her mother did not answer immediately, "Yes, darling," she would refuse to move. Once, when her mother was telling her how God rewards good children, and how, in spite of his kindness, he is obliged to punish the naughty ones, Therese answered, "I know what I should do if I had been naughty. I would hide myself in your arms, and you would hold me so tight that God would not be able to take me from your arms." She seemed so convinced that she would be safe from punishment if she took refuge with her mother, that Madame Martin's thoughts turned to Our Blessed Lady, and she resolved to inspire the child with a great love and trust for her heavenly mother. Thérèse had such an affectionate nature that she could not bear to think she had caused her parents the least pain, nor would she be parted, even for a short time, from those she loved. Marie used to give Céline lessons, but she would not let Thérèse stay in the room, fearing this would distract her pupil. The little one, however, begged so hard to be with Céline, and promised so earnestly to be good, that at last she was allowed to come. Marie gave her beads to thread and some pieces of stuff to sew, and she sat on a little stool, as quiet as a mouse. If her needle became unthreaded, she did not say a word, but big tears would fall silently until Marie came to the rescue and made her happy by rethreading the needle. She did not enjoy any treat which she could not share with Céline. Once, when she was only 2 or 3, she went to see her aunt, a visitation nun, who gave her a pretty basket full of sweets decorated with 2 sugar rings. Thérèse immediately decided that one of these rings must be for Céline, and was full of delight at the thought of giving it to her when she got home. But, alas, on the way, she upset all the sweets, and the precious rings were lost. Bitter lamentations followed, because she had, after all, no present for her sister. While Thérèse was away in the country, Madame Martin constantly recommended her to the protection of her guardian angel. He gave a proof of his watchful care after his little charge had returned home. One morning, Madame Martin had gone out, according to her custom, to hear an early mass, leaving her baby daughter, then only 15 months old, fast asleep in her cot. What was her astonishment, on her return, to find the child on a chair beside the bed, still sleeping peacefully, while the cradle lay overturned on the floor. It was, humanly speaking, impossible to explain either how she had escaped being hurt by the fall, or who had put her on the chair. The only solution seemed to be that her guardian angel had taken care of her. But though our good angel accompanies us everywhere, there is often a wicked spirit who hovers round us, trying to make us do wrong. One of his first attacks on little Thérèse was by tempting her to vanity when she was barely 3 years old. She and her sisters had been invited by a friend to spend the days in the country. Madame Martin told Marie to dress Thérèse and to put on her best frock, which had short sleeves. But on second thought, she said, "No, put on another frock. It is too cold for her to have bare arms." Thérèse at once felt the prick of temptation. She wanted very much to wear the best frock, for she said to herself, "I should look ever so much prettier with bare arms." But while the bad angel was whispering thoughts of vanity, her good angel was speaking gently to her heart, and his voice prevailed. Thérèse let herself be dressed without saying a word. She had won her first victory, and her good angel wrote it down joyfully in his big golden book.